So the new next-gen consoles are coming out later this year, that being the Xbox Series X and the PS5, and likely your setup might not be ready for that right now. But since we now know a lot of the specs for both of those consoles, we can now start to think, what do you actually need to be ready for these next-gen consoles? Let's get into it. And let's start with the main thing being the display and what resolution and frame rate you plan to actually play any of the games on these new gen consoles. Now they both seem to be aiming for a 4K consistent mark with 60 FPS up to 120 FPS, but I don't know if they're going to be able to achieve that all the time at 4K, but 4K being the highest resolution, 120 FPS being the highest frame rate, so that's an ideal way to gauge what they're after and what you can then base your options from. If the pixels is what you're mainly after in experience, then the 8.3 million of them in a 4K display, yes I had to remember that, is probably what you're going to be after. Most of them will probably have 60 FPS, whether that's a TV or a monitor. That'll be nice if you're wanting to actually get that proper quality. Bear in mind, if you're after 4K, the bigger the TV, if that's all you're looking for the visual experience, is probably going to benefit you more. The smaller, it's going to be hard to notice it, and then you may be spending more when you don't need to. And of course, this is already good because I know a lot of people probably already have a 4K TV in their living room or wherever they plan to play. They could already just have this, so this may already be your default option just because you have it. As for anyone with 1080p displays, you've got a few more options purely because you haven't reached the peak of it yet. You can go up to 1440p, which is a solid improvement over 1080p. You get way more pixels, it looks better, and you can combo that with 120Hz. For anyone who's experienced a higher refresh rate of that on a phone or anything, you probably know how big of a difference it is and how much you probably never want to leave it ever again. So I think that'll be a better improvement than jumping straight to 4K but sticking at 60Hz. Yes, it's not a 4K resolution that the consoles are actually aiming for more consistently, but 4040p is still a good improvement, and I feel like the refresh rate jump is going to be more of a noticeable boost to you than the pixel jump, especially if you tried going back from one of those. I feel like jumping from 120Hz back to 60 is going to be more detrimental to you, and you'll be like, I could never switch back to that. The budget is obviously the most important factor. If you simply can't afford the higher end stuff, then you can't afford it, or if you just don't want to spend the money, whatever reason, that is absolutely fine. But if you still want to spend a bit money, you just don't want to spend upper echelons, sticking at 1080p, which yes, it's still 1080p, which is now suddenly becoming outdated, but going up to let's say 120Hz is a solid option. You get the boost of refresh rate, that's going to look buttery smooth all over when you're playing all your games, especially fast-paced games, shooters, etc. like that. And it's a nice hold off until maybe you can get, let's say, 1440p all the way to 4K, although then you'll now have to get 120Hz with every display. That way you don't feel like you could have just stuck with your old console, considering you're not playing at any higher quality. So for people looking for upgrades, 1080p 120 is the cheapest option, 1440p at 120 is a good option as well, and then 4K at 60 is probably the highest option. I would say 4K 120Hz. I'd just say that combo is probably far too much for anyone to be spending on a monitor or whatever, and I don't even know if they exist very regularly. You can probably leave that option alone. There is also HDR monitors, but it's the same story as earlier. They just cost too much if you want to get it right. You can get cheaper ones, but they don't look anywhere near as good as a proper HDR monitor, and you might as well stick with normal. It just adds too much of a cost. If you can, it's brilliant. If you can't, leave it. It'll be fine for another upgrade another day. Now onto storage. Let's talk about planning that, and let's start with the PS5. The PS5 is planned to come out with an 825GB custom SSD, and it's not a terabyte like the Series X, but it's still a solid amount to have. There's no worries on that. But considering how large games are these days, and the amount of games you probably still have from your PS4 that you might plan to bring over, and you may not have a portable hard drive, etc., that's going to fill up pretty quickly. Now, of course, there is expandable storage options, but it gets complicated from here out, so let's go with it. So the first option is to get a new NVMe drive. It either replaces or adds on to the one that's in the PS5. We currently don't know which one it does. Likely just going to be replaced. So you get a bigger one, but it has to be the PCIe 4.0, as that's the only one that actually runs at the same sort of speeds as the one that's in it, which of course is what all the developers are expecting to be inside the PS5, so that's what they're building their games off of, that same exact speeds. And not only are they expensive and probably going to be hard to find, unless Sony actually certify that exact one you're looking at as one that will run in the PS5, it might not exactly work to specification. A few variants, basically stuff that you don't really want to be sticking in your head when you're thinking, is this one going to work after I've just spent this much money? They are going to be releasing a list of them soon, but I assume that's going to be a lot closer, or probably even after launch, when you'll actually get a certain list of, okay, these are ones you can expand your storage with. We just don't know yet on that. The second option, which everyone was probably expecting, is just to get a portable hard drive and plug it into your PS5. Now, the problem immediately with that is they just don't run at the same speeds as the NVMe SSD inside the PS5, which all the games are built for, so they won't be able to store or play any PS5's games on them without a doubt. They will be able to store your old PS4 games and older ones if they have backwards compatibility on that sort of stuff, but any PS5 games, it won't store. So it's pretty much useless if you're trying to expand that type of storage, but for old games, I guess that's a use case for it. On the Series X side, they have the same sort of system. It's a 1TB custom SSD this time, a bit bigger, but again, very likely to be filled up pretty quickly. And again, the options are very similar, but Microsoft has kind of had a little bit of a head start on this with including an expansion port in the back and getting Seagate to custom make some expansion cards that add another terabyte of SSD storage to it. The exact same specifications as the one that's already inside. As far as we know, the expansion cards are pretty much plug and play. Plug it straight into the slot in the back of the console, instant extra terabyte of storage, or if they include any other options, we don't know. But as far as I know, they're just doing 1 terabytes. Probably more soon. Hopefully they'll be ready for launch day in the holiday season. We don't know yet. Maybe they'll be available a little bit after. And if there's going to be any more options, we don't know yet either. And as they are custom, Seagate are going to be the exclusive partners to do this currently until third-party people get allowed. But we can assume these are going to be pretty expensive. I mean, a 1 terabyte SSD isn't exactly cheap considering how good this one is. It's not going to be cheap and there's no competitors to really drive it down, etc. Expect to pay a pretty penny for these. Now again, you can still use an external hard drive, but the same exact problem applies. No Series X game's going to run on it. It's good for old Xbox One, 360 titles that you want to bring over on a separate hard drive to keep your main one clean, but that's about it. Not useful for anything on the modern games at all. Now we hinted on it a bit, let's talk about the backwards compatibility of both of these consoles and what you can expect if you're going to get the new consoles, how many of your old games are going to be able to run on it still. Microsoft by far just have had the best situation on this. They've had more or less every single 360 game that you can think of already set up backwards compatible to the Xbox One. Same with original Xbox games, and they plan to pretty much just extend it by adding more or less all the Xbox One games to that exact same list. So it'll just be a straight list of pretty much every game you've ever owned probably being on the list. And if it's not, it's only a matter of time until it adds on to that list. You should be fine on that if you're on an Xbox side. Sony, on the other hand, I don't know the full backstory, but they haven't been anywhere near as close to Xbox on that market. But for the PS5, they do plan to have the top 100 PS4 games available, they say by launch, to be backwards compatible straight on the PS5. Hopefully that is already by launch, and those top 100 games you can just play straight away, and hopefully those are the games you have. But it'll slowly become a bigger list, and it will be a bit more comparable, maybe not ever as fully comparable, but better compared to the Xbox side anyway. And obviously for games that are still in their life cycle, example GTA 5, Fortnite, Apex Legends, those sorts of games that are just still somehow, especially with GTA continuing into the next generation, they'll probably just get an extra patch. We know obviously GTA 5 is getting expanded and enhanced. They'll get an extra patch, give them a Series X version of their games or a PS5 version of their games, and it'll just continue as if it's a brand new game. No need to keep them on an old hard drive, they'll be on the new one. You can not even worry about any of those. Now to finally wrap up this has probably been a long one, let's talk about the old console you have and the old accessories you have and what the hell you're going to do with those. Now an idea for the console, this is probably a bit more of a gimmick. I assume most people are going to be selling them to fund for their new console, which is completely understandable. I would expect most people to do that. But if for some reason are going to be able to keep it, using it to only store your old Xbox One and past games, or your old PS4 and older games, whatever you use, could be a good option. Leaving your PS5 or Xbox Series X to just purely be for the new games, not cluttering any of the storage that way. That's probably a more expensive option than just selling it and buying a portable hard drive, but if you have the luxury to do it, you could do that. The Xbox One and PS4 controllers, as far as I know for the PS4 anyway, will just seamlessly work with your new consoles, and therefore you can use them as a second controller for your new one. You can either have them as a one for your friend, or just as a backup in case you accidentally break your new ones. But that's nice of them to do that, and that way you just don't have to fork out some extra cash if you want a second one for your friend or someone in your family. Now most headsets are more likely just going to carry over straight from your old consoles, they'll just be fine. I know one exact example, which is the Astro lineup. Because of the optical port being left out of the Xbox Series X, they had to work around and make sure it worked with the USB. That's the only example I've heard in that instance. I'm pretty certain all headsets should just carry over fine. So pretty much all your accessories in total just work with your new ones. So yeah, after finally covering the display sort of side, the storage side, the game side, the accessory side, I think you are now finally ready to plan, at least, for the next gen consoles and what you'll be using, and your setup should be just about fine. It was a long one, I hope it helped, I hope I explained it well enough for you, and I hope now you have an idea of where you're going to take your setup for the next gen consoles. If you have any questions on any of this stuff, let me know in the comments. If I said anything wrong and you think there's another option, let me know in the comments as well. But yeah, after that, that is it. I will catch you all guys in the next video. See ya.
Bye.